Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly fascinating topic, the collision of modern economic hardship and behavioral science. We're going to unpack how a massive macroeconomic squeeze doesn't just change the physical landscape of our cities, but actually completely rewires the human brain on a micro level.
Okay, let's ground ourselves immediately in reality here. $2,570. According to the State of the Nation's Housing 2025 report, this is the monthly mortgage payment on a median-priced home for your typical first-time buyer today. After adjusting for inflation, we're talking about a staggering 40% increase since 1990. It's a massive number, and honestly, it's totally redefining the American dream.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by looking at the 2025 housing squeeze and unprecedented cost burdens. From there, we'll dive into the psychology of scarcity, explore behavioral responses like entering the rat race versus choosing to lie flat, and finally, we'll talk about coping with the crisis.
Section 1, the 2025 housing squeeze, a market out of reach. To really grasp the psychological impact here, we first need to understand the sheer scale of the crisis using some hard data from Harvard.
Right now, the U.S. median existing single-family home price has hit an unbelievable $412,500. To put that into perspective, that is 5 times the median household income. Traditionally, a safe price-to-income ratio is considered to be around 3. We are so far beyond that baseline, it's not even funny. We're living in an environment of extreme resource scarcity.
And the stark reality of the trend lines is just wild. To afford that median home today, a buyer needs an annual income of at least $126,700. Think about that for a second. You literally need to make nearly $130,000 just to be considered average in this market. And on top of that, you need over $26,800 in cash just to cover a bare minimum 3.5% down payment and closing costs. The barrier to entry isn't just high. For a huge chunk of people, it's mathematically insurmountable.
Moving on to Section 2, unprecedented cost burdens. Let's break down how these towering entry costs are bleeding into everyday living for both renters and owners. Here is the absolute crucial takeaway from the data. The volume is record-breaking. 20.3 million homeowners and a staggering 22.6 million renters are now officially cost-burdened. That means they're pouring over 30% of their income purely into housing and utilities. For renters making under $30,000 a year, that leaves them with a median of just $250 a month after paying for a roof over their heads. $250 for food, transit, everything. And it's not just the base rent or the mortgage squeezing folks. Since 2019, home insurance premiums have spiked 57%, which is often driven by climate-related risks. Meanwhile, low-rent apartment units are just vanishing into thin air. It is a total pressure cooker out there, felt everywhere from low-rise neighborhoods to the towering high-rises. It's an inescapable reality right now. Which brings us to Section 3, the psychology of scarcity. How does the mind actually adapt to this intense pressure?
I want you to ask yourself this right now. Faced with this kind of unprecedented resource scarcity, the high rents, the impossible down payments, how do we cope? How does your brain handle this intense financial squeeze? Well, recent psychological research gives us a really fascinating framework to understand our own reactions. Scientists point to something called competition stress, but it's not just one big wave of anxiety. It's actually multidimensional. It encompasses the stress of the result, meaning the fear of totally losing out on a home, and the stress of the process, meaning the sheer exhaustion of having to fight every single day just to survive in the market. How your brain perceives the stress entirely dictates how you're going to behave.
Let's look at the first response in Section 4, entering the rat race and the fight for fluid compensation. When people are hit really hard by competition result stress, like the sheer panic of failing to save that $26,800 down payment, they often lean into what psychologists call a fluid compensation strategy. Basically, they double down, they hustle harder, they enter the rat race to overcompensate and forcefully take back their sense of achievement. They try to outcompete the market itself. The underlying mechanism here is absolutely fascinating. We usually assume people in the rat race are just driven by greed or materialism, right? But the research shows it's actually a massive defensive mechanism. The inability to secure a basic resource like housing registers in the brain as a profound threat to your self-esteem. The rat race is less about getting rich and way more about desperately protecting a threatened sense of self-worth.
Now for the total opposite reaction in Section 5, choosing to lie flat and escaping the noise.
When a person's focus shifts from the end result to the grueling, never-ending process of competing alongside 22.6 million other burden renters, they often adopt an escapism compensation strategy. The exhaustion of the daily grind literally threatens their core well-being, so they intentionally disengage. They choose to lie flat. They stop trying to buy the impossible house, they step off the treadmill, and they prioritize inner peace over societal expectations. It's wild when you think about it. The exact same objective economic data, a housing market totally out of reach, triggers two completely contrasting coping mechanisms based entirely on how the brain processes the threat. If it threatens your self-esteem, you run the rat race. If it threatens your well-being, you choose to lie flat.
So what do we do about it? Let's cover that in Section 6, Coping with the Crisis, and some actionable strategies.
Fortunately, science gives us some guide rails to help manage these natural responses. If you find yourself caught up in the rat race, the research suggests you need self-affirmation. That means actively recalling past successes to restore your psychological battery without burning out. Conversely, if you're pulling back and lying flat, you heavily rely on social support, leaning on friends and family to validate your choice and maintain your mental health. And remember, neither of these is wrong. They are both completely valid, predictable responses to extreme resource scarcity.
Look, we can't single-handedly control the reality of a $412,500 median home price. The macroeconomic walls around us are fixed for the time being, but we absolutely can understand, observe, and manage our psychological response to it. Knowing whether you're fighting for your self-esteem or protecting your well-being gives you the actual power to cope in a much healthier way.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder today. Take a close look at your own life, your ambitions, your stresses. In a market totally defined by intense resource scarcity, does your psychological strategy truly serve your self-esteem or your well-being? Figuring that out might just be the key to surviving the squeeze. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.